bond. Prosecutors say she told investigators she abandoned the baby.
That night in Houston was thick and suffocating, not just from the summer heat blanketing the city, but from something far more tragic unfolding silently behind a taco truck. No one paid attention to the young girl with her hair tied back, arms greasy from a long shift, crouching behind the food truck parked near a worn-down apartment complex on Dashwood Drive. Her name was Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam, only 18 years old. She was an undocumented migrant from Guatemala, working for cash under the table, quiet, invisible, a shadow in a city too big for stories like hers to be noticed. But that night, her story forced itself into the light. Just past midnight, Everilda sat on the burning concrete behind the taco truck, laboring through unbearable pain. No hospital, no family, no help. And then, in absolute silence, a baby was born. A boy, still attached to his umbilical cord. She wrapped him in a plastic trash bag, tied it shut, and placed it in a dumpster. The next morning, a passerby heard a faint sound near the trash. It wasn't a stray cat or a homeless scavenger. It was a cry, a desperate, fading cry for life. First responders arrived quickly. Miraculously, the newborn was alive. He was rushed to Texas Children's Hospital in critical condition, where doctors stabilized him and named him Gabriel. Security footage pulled from nearby cameras showed a young woman placing a bag by the dumpster late at night. Within hours, police had identified and arrested Everilda, but what began as a criminal case soon cracked open something deeper, a humanitarian tragedy at the intersection of immigration, fear, and an invisible crisis of abandoned newborns. You're watching Echoes of the Court, where we revisit cases that force society to reckon with truth, justice, and the limits of compassion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next case. When first responders opened the black plastic bag, they could hardly believe their eyes. Inside was a newborn baby boy, reddened, curled up, still covered in blood and placenta, struggling to move. His body temperature was dangerously low, the umbilical cord still attached, and his breaths were faint, shallow. Doctors later confirmed, had they arrived just 10 minutes later, Gabriel would not have survived. News of the case spread quickly. A baby, found in a dumpster behind a taco truck, rescued by chance, thanks to a bystander who heard a weak cry. Security footage captured a young woman approaching the dumpster at night, placing the bag beside it, and walking away quietly. By that afternoon, police had identified her, Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam. She did not resist arrest. Silent, red-eyed, and physically exhausted, she confessed in her first police interview to giving birth behind the taco truck, where she worked, and said, "I didn't know what to do. I was just scared." The public was horrified, not just by the act, but by the circumstances. An undocumented immigrant girl under 19, with no ID, no family, and no access to health care or legal protection in Texas. She had no idea that under Texas's safe haven law, known as the Baby Moses Law, she could have legally surrendered her baby at a hospital, fire station, or police department without facing prosecution. Instead, fear of deportation, fear of abandonment by her boyfriend, and fear of her family's reaction pushed Everilda to a desperate decision. A psychiatrist would later assess the situation as an acute psychological breakdown. She didn't discard her baby out of cruelty. She truly believed she had no other way. Gabriel, the baby thrown away, became a symbol of survival. But his mother, Everilda, became the lightning rod of public outrage in a state infamous for its harsh abortion and immigration laws. Immediately after her arrest, Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam was booked into Harris County Jail with an initial bond set at $90,000. But shortly thereafter, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, issued an emergency hold. As an undocumented migrant, Everilda was considered a flight risk. Her bond was revoked, and she remained in custody alone, voiceless, without legal counsel, and with no one to advocate for her. In the first few months, she barely spoke. Social workers described her as small, withdrawn, and exhibiting signs of deep depression. She had never finished high school, didn't understand the legal process, and couldn't advocate for herself. Everilda was the living example of a marginalized class of undocumented laborers, whom the American legal system rarely touches until one mistake makes them its target. When asked why she didn't bring the baby to a hospital or seek help, she simply shook her head and whispered in broken Spanish mixed with Mom, her indigenous language, "I didn't know. I was just afraid." And that fear wasn't unfounded. In Texas's undocumented communities, accessing health care is a luxury either too expensive or too risky. Many young women hide their pregnancies, give birth alone at home or at work, and afterward don't know what to do. For Everilda, the dumpster wasn't a choice. It was despair. Court records revealed she had hidden her pregnancy for months. No one at work or among the few people she interacted with suspected anything. When the day came, she had no plan, no safe space, and no one to call. For in one 8-year-old girl, far from home, undocumented, and entirely alone just surviving the birth, was a miracle. But that same miracle became the evidence that would criminally indict her. And then the question arose, if Gabriel had died, would she have been charged with murder? But because the baby survived, would her sentence be more lenient? In the eyes of the law, Gabriel's survival was what mattered. But in the eyes of society, Everilda's survival as a mother, as a human, was barely even considered. In July 2025, after nearly a year in detention, Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam finally appeared before a judge in Harris County. The courtroom was nearly empty. Media attention had long faded. She stood at the front, hands trembling, holding a signed plea deal that would seal her fate. Under the agreement with prosecutors, Everilda pled guilty to abandoning a child in a situation that posed imminent danger to life. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Nearly 1 year of time already served was credited, and after completing her sentence, she would almost certainly be deported back to Guatemala, a country where she had no remaining family, no job prospects, and not even official identification. The judge looked her in the eyes and asked, "Is there anything you wish to say before sentencing?" Everilda lowered her head and said quietly, "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt my baby. I just didn't know what to do." That apology echoed across a system that is well versed in punishment, but not in mercy. No one in court asked, why did this girl give birth behind a food truck? Why didn't anyone know she was pregnant? Why didn't the healthcare system or social services reach her in time? And more importantly, why was there no one near her, ever? Texas's safe haven law allows parents to legally surrender infants at hospitals, fire stations, or police stations within 60 days of birth, no questions asked. But what good is a law if those who need it the most don't even know it exists? For Everilda, legal protections were written in a language she couldn't speak. No one had told her. There were no pamphlets in Mom, her native language, no outreach, no awareness. Courtroom observers noted the absence of any family or community members advocating for her. No one from immigration support groups, no representative from a health or social agency, and certainly no one from the taco truck where she'd spent months working in silence. Gabriel's survival, while miraculous, became the basis for the prosecution. But no one acknowledged that the systems meant to protect people like Everilda had failed long before that night behind the truck. Justice, they said, had been served. But where was compassion? The legal file on Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam may span only a few pages. Charges filed, a guilty plea, and a sentence. But her real story, the one no one read aloud in court, is a long, bruised history of systemic neglect, generational poverty, and social invisibility. She was born in the highlands of Guatemala, in a rural village where her family spoke Mom, an indigenous language, not Spanish, and certainly not English. Her parents were illiterate farmers, surviving on subsistence crops and whatever money an uncle could send home from working in the U.S. At 16, Everilda crossed the border illegally, like so many other teenagers chasing the illusion of opportunity. But what she found was not a dream. It was 14-hour shifts behind a taco truck, paid in cash, no papers, no protections. She fell in love with a coworker, also undocumented, who later abandoned her when he found out she was pregnant. When Gabriel was born behind that truck, there were no welcoming arms, no cameras, No crib. Only fear. And that fear led to the act that shocked the city, placing her newborn into a plastic bag and leaving him in a dumpster. An act that cannot be justified but can, perhaps, be understood if we zoom out far enough. At her sentencing, there were no family members present. No one stood to speak on her behalf. And no one from any hospital, charity, or immigrant rights group came forward to testify how the system had failed her. No one had ever asked, was she abused? Had she been coerced? Did someone promise to help and then disappear when things got complicated? In a society that offers no soft landings for the poor and undocumented, perhaps the better question is, how could she have possibly survived without breaking? Gabriel, the child she left behind, now lives with a foster family in Texas. He will grow up never knowing his birth mother, or worse, only knowing the headlines, "Teen Mom Dumps Baby Behind Taco Truck." But here's the truth few dare to say. Everilda may have dropped her child into that dumpster, but society had dropped her long before that. The trash was just the final stop. When the sentencing concluded, and Everilda was handed 7 years in prison, local newspapers gave the story a few inches of column space. Some ran headlines like, "Teen Mom Gets Light Sentence After Dumping Newborn," or "Miracle Baby Found Crying in Trash." Public outrage flared briefly on social media, then moved on. Online, the comments were ruthless. "She deserves the death penalty. No excuse. She's a monster. Illegals are destroying this country." But behind those screen names and outrage posts, no one saw the girl who used to sleep on a storage room floor after her shifts. No one heard her cry alone in a dark corner of the taco truck kitchen. No one cared that she couldn't understand the words, "You have the right to remain silent," when they were first read to her. No one asked, had she been exploited? Had anyone threatened her? Had someone promised help then disappeared? All the pieces that might have made her more than a headline were left out because, in the eyes of many, she wasn't worth the deeper look. Statistically, most infant abandonment cases in Texas involve immigrant mothers, many of them undocumented, many speaking indigenous languages, most living in hiding. They don't know their rights, they don't trust authorities, and when they break under pressure, they're labeled in brutal, inhuman terms: killer, psycho, child dumper. Dr. Daniel Bober, a psychiatrist who reviewed the case, said in a rare interview, "This wasn't a calculated crime. This was the act of someone pushed to the psychological edge. We love to condemn the horror, but we rarely question the layers that led someone there." And so we're left with a harsh imbalance. A 9-year-old girl with no home, no money, no family, sentenced to 7 years and then exile. Is that justice? Or is it a cleansing away for society to remove its most inconvenient mistakes? Her name is Everilda Cux-Ajtzalam. Most won't remember it. Some won't even know how to pronounce it. To many Americans, it's just a foreign-sounding name attached to a headline about a newborn in a dumpster. But for those who truly look into this case, her name should be remembered as a fracture not just in her life, but in the very system that allowed her to fall through unnoticed. Gabriel, the baby who survived, remains a miracle within a tragedy. He will grow up with questions. Who was his mother? Why did she abandon him? He may never meet her, and if he does, he may only know her through the cold facts of court records and clickbait headlines. As for Everilda, when she finishes her sentence, she will be deported to a Guatemala she barely remembers, with no resources, no family, and no path forward. Branded with a conviction, known only for a moment of desperation, she will try to start over in a world that never gave her a beginning. And the rest of us are left with questions. If a young woman gives birth alone, in fear, and leaves her baby behind a taco truck, who failed her more? The girl who acted in desperation? Or the society that never gave her a choice? The law has spoken. The punishment is set. But legal justice is not the same as moral reckoning. And while we can punish the act, what have we done to prevent the next one? Because the truth is, Everilda didn't act alone. She had silent accomplices: poverty, fear, language barriers, immigration policies, and the silence of a system that only pays attention after a tragedy. We must ask better questions. How do we ensure no more Gabriels are left behind? How do we prevent more Everildas from reaching that edge alone? And how do we build a world where those who are invisible don't stay that way until it's too late? Thank you for staying with us through this difficult story. If you believe these voices deserve to be heard, the lost, the judged, the ones left behind, subscribe to Echoes of the Court. Share this video. Help us uncover not just crimes, but the truths buried beneath them.